Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. We are coming to you from outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We are doing a special Patreon sunglass vlog today for Betty Von Drasek. Betty has been with me for a long time, and this is gonna be a special one. I love Andy Warhol from the time that I was in 7th grade and was introduced to his art, his style, his influence on pop culture. I've been a fan. So today we're gonna go see his grave, his childhood home, and the church that inspired a lot of his art. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. A lot of people may not know Andy was very religious in his life. His parents instilled that in him at a very early age, even with all of his problems and his social issues and everything. He would still go to church every week with the family. This one was kind of easy to find because it's not often you go into a cemetery and they have cameras pointed right at a headstone, but they must have issues. I'm surprised. I wouldn't think anybody would come and bother Andy Warhol, or Andy Warhola, his birth name. Probably thinking, why didn't you bring Campbell's soup? Because I knew everybody else would. And they did. Right there he is. Looks like people have even left like an art box and stuff. Write a note, it says. Make a drawing for Andy. Here's his grave. Andy Warhol. God. Talk about people that really changed history. His effect on pop culture was unmistakable. Andy Warhol. His parents are right there. Andrew Warhola and Julia Warhola, who they were immigrants, and his father worked so hard. His father died in 1942, but his father worked from the time he woke up till the time he basically went home and went to bed. His family said he had no hobbies. He worked as often as possible. He's a workaholic. Sometimes had to travel for work, and unfortunately Andy was a sick boy. When he was young, he had a very bad nervous disorder that made it almost impossible for, he would have like crippling effects where he couldn't walk or talk. He would get so nervous and just uncomfortable, and it was a diagnosed affliction. So his mother ended up taking care of him when he was little, babying him. They said he was basically always around her, and he spent all of his early days, he didn't go to school. Initially, he was homeschooled. He would spend all of his time in the living room drawing. His father knew that Andy was special, though. He thought that Andy's art could lead him somewhere at some point, so his father would eventually invest money in Andy taking art lessons. And then when he got a little older, he felt like he was capable of going to school, so he, as a teenager, started attending public schools. And there people would kind of make fun of him because he was definitely different. But during this time, he got really, really heavily involved in going to the movies. And he loved the movies. He was a big fan of Shirley Temple and Marilyn Monroe, and there was just an escapism there that he just became obsessed with, and his parents were nice enough to indulge him in that. So that would become something he would do later on in his life, is make movies. But sadly, his father ended up dying when I believe Andy was 14. His father actually was poisoned at a job site by bad water. It wasn't intentional, but he ended up dying, and Andy was so thrown and distraught by this that he wouldn't attend the funeral. And he and his mother were very close. When she eventually died, it was the same issue. He was just so perplexed by it and everything, he couldn't attend her funeral as well. But his father believed in Andy's art And so, like I said, he worked hard and saved a lot of money, and he wanted his kids to have a good life. So his two older sons were athletic and they had jobs and everything, but he saved his money. He wanted Andy to go to college, go to art school. And so that's what happened. When Andy was 17, he found a art school and started attending, started studying graphic design. His art was somewhat controversial, things that he would draw for classes. People didn't know whether it was good or bad, or whether he should be kicked out of the school or what. So it took him several years to get through school. Then when he did, he decided to move to New York, which is kind of surprising because somebody who was so shy and standoffish to people would go to such a big city, but the city really opened him up. He went there and met a fellow art friend, got an apartment with them, and started shopping around his drawings. Since he was a graphic designer and everything, he started sending off his art to different publications like fashion magazines, and sure enough, they started hiring him. And next thing he knew, he was highly sought after. He was doing window displays, and he was drawing the pictures for inside magazines. And then his mother, since he was a little bit successful, his mother just showed up at his door one day in New York and said that she was moving in. And she did, for the next 20 years. So she ended up moving in with him and taking care of him. She said he needed someone to take care of him. And she apparently had a very unique style of handwriting. It was very unique, and Andy started using it in some of his designs for the magazines, and people loved it. So then they wanted more. So she became highly sought after and ended up winning design awards based off of just her artwork alone. Even when she was a kid, or when Andy was a kid, she would use these Campbell soup cans and put paper mache and decorate them and go door to door and try and sell them as like flower pots or flower vases or whatever. So she was very interesting in and of herself. You can definitely tell where he got it from. But he started making so much money that he finally just decided, I don't need to work anymore. I've made enough. I'm just gonna do what I want, and I'm not gonna work for other people. So no matter how many publications would try and hire him, he would turn them down, and he started painting out of his house. And that's when the pop culture stuff kind of crept in. He had a friend that explained to him one day, was like, did you ever notice how a single image is much more powerful than if you have a lot of them? So he had thought, you know, looking at a row of Campbell soup cans in a store was not as powerful as just seeing one individual one. So he started doing that kind of stuff. He started doing the pop culture stuff, and his family believes it was based off of like the church that they went to, how there was bright and colorful designs all over the place. When you walked in, it was just like a heaven. And so that was the same kind of art that he was creating, that same color. And so he would do that for a while and was becoming successful. He was doing like dollar bills or like dollar signs, and then started doing the Campbell soup stuff. And then he realized that sometimes historical events were the kinds of things that people remembered. So he started focusing on like tragedies. He was doing paintings of, you know, plane crash headlines. And when Marilyn Monroe died, he did the painting of Marilyn that he's so well known for. And he just said it was a sad part of our culture, but death, it was attractive to people. And so he started doing that. He started mass producing his art by silk screening. He started having like several people working for him. He bought the factory, or leased out the factory, painted the whole place silver and chrome and put aluminum foil all over it. And then just basically had like an open door policy. He would throw parties and let people come, whoever he liked, for poor people, people off the street, rich people. He liked them all to mingle together and see what happened. So for being a shy kid, when he was an adult, he loved this kind of energy. He loved people being around. He loved all this, and he didn't ever bring any of the partiers or friends or anything to his home. His mother lived on the first floor of his home. He lived above, and the party always stayed at the factory. He eventually started making movies out of the factory, which were really avant-garde. He made one about the Empire State Building that was just one single shot of the Empire State Building that lasted for 8 hours. He just filmed it for 8 hours and couldn't understand why people didn't like it. He would start doing several different things during this time. He found the Velvet Underground in a cafe and decided he wanted to let them move into the factory and let them rehearse and then produce their album, did the album art. And then, somewhere in the 60s, he just decided, I'm done painting. I don't want to do this anymore. So he kind of bowed away from painting and fell into, surprisingly, photography. Maybe not surprisingly. Said he just had all kinds of weird feelings after his mother died, and he started recording, like audio recording everything, and you couldn't find him without a Polaroid. He always was snapping photos and became pretty sought after for this. Like big name stars, like people like Cher, Mick Jagger would hire him to do their portraits. And then he got tired of doing that and went heavily religious. He was, you know, he had made those movies before, and a woman that was a part of this movement called Scum, Society Cutting Up Men, wanted him to make her movie. And she told him about the movie. He said he wasn't interested. She gave him a script. He said he wasn't interested, and then he lost the script. And one day she came to his house. They're riding up in the elevator together, and Andy got on the phone to talk to his mother, who was at the beauty parlor apparently. And while he was on the phone, this woman pulled out a gun and shot him. Shot him all the way through his body. The bullet traveled through, they said, like 5 or 6 organs. He almost didn't live. But when he came out of that, he was just terrified of everything. He really didn't go out that much. He became very religious. He did eventually go back to doing a little bit of painting, but towards the end, it really turned into religion. He was doing religious paintings and things like that. And then sadly went in for a gallbladder surgery and passed away. He told a friend of his when he was shot, he actually believed that he had died. He said because when he was laying there on the table, he heard the news talking about Kennedy being shot. And so he thought that he was actually reliving life from when John F. Kennedy was shot, but it was actually that Robert F. Kennedy had been shot as well. People didn't get his movies, but he was really trying to capture moments. Wasn't trying to script a moment, he was trying to capture moments with interesting people. And like I said, he was so drawn when he was young to those movies with like Shirley Temple and Marilyn Monroe, and they were just these fantastical characters that those were the kind of people that he would end up wanting in his movie and befriending. And when I lived in Hollywood, a friend of mine lived in this just real crap hole building and always had this real mean like apartment manager that was always in the front of the building. And anytime I'd go to visit him, who are you here to see? And I'd say, I'm going to see Ray, and he'd let me in or whatever. And then one day I said to my friend, I go, God, you ever wonder what that guy's story is down there? Like what his life was like? And he goes, oh, I know exactly what his life was like. Look him up. His name's Joe D'Alessandro. I looked him up, and he was one of Andy Warhol's movie stars. Joe actually would do an interview later saying that his younger brother, was Andy's driver, and that Andy really never talked to anybody. Like people that he, like if he was filming a movie or anything, he didn't really talk to people that much. But Joe would say he found out after Andy died that his brother said, oh yeah, he talked to me all the time when I would drive him around. He was like the one person he would talk to. That's cool. They have all kinds of sketch pads in here. Andy's relatives, like his nephews, told stories about how they would go visit him in the early days when he kind of had retired from doing the advertising stuff and started painting, and he would teach them how to stretch canvases for him. And now some of those relatives are also artists in their own right. Nice for people to leave messages. As soon as I opened up the pad, I saw this. That's a nice one. Simple and to the point. Here's mine. Being that he was so religious, thought that was appropriate. Now I want to go visit the church and childhood home. Interesting art. This church right here was actually Andy's childhood church. His family lived quite a ways away and actually would walk in the snow. They were so dedicated to it. Till Andy was about 7 years old when his father was able to get them a home a little closer in this neighborhood. But if you notice, the emblem at the very top was on Andy's parents' headstone. His mother was very, very, very devout, insisted on everyone in the family being, and they used to come every Sunday, no matter what the weather was, whether it was snowing or raining or whatnot. It's the St. John the Baptist Byzantine Catholic Church. I'm hoping that we'll get lucky enough to see it open. Apparently it was, it was a really big influence on Andy's art. As you can see on the side of the building, there was stained glass windows that would help add to the vibrance of his art. Unfortunately, they have the doors chained. That is a bummer because churches used to be able to be open all day long for people to come in. Kind of crazy to think of a young Andy Warhol in his young years who would eventually go up and change so much of the world, would walk in through those doors, up those steps so often in his life. So apparently the insides here were just very, very lavish. From what his nephews would tell stories, they said that when you came in here, it was domed and there was stained glass everywhere and gold pictures all over the wall that would be like religious figures with just a gold background. They said that they thought that the beauty of coming here, the chants and the singing and the incense and everything, it was just like heaven on earth. It was meant to be that. And Andy took that into his art. He would end up making, if you look at like the Maryland and the Campbell soup, it has like this basic solid background, same way that the inside of this church was. See if I can find some photos of the interior online to share with you. But I thought with such a heavy influence on his life, we had to come here and check it out. Well, I tried. There was an office here. Went and rang the doorbell, nobody answered, but I was hoping maybe I could show you a little, but we can kind of through here see the stained glass and stuff like that. The beauty that would have been up there. Looks like it's advertising the church is still open on Sundays. But yeah, I was kind of hoping, because churches used to be open all day long for people to come, especially like Catholic churches and stuff. So yeah, I'll just show you some photos of what I was able to find what the inside looks like. It's pretty amazing on the inside. Okay, let's go ahead and go to our last stop of the day, which is Andy's house. Even though his dad moved him closer, it was still a 1.5 mile walk away to get to church from where they moved to. Kind of surprised when I got over to Andy's street that right at the end of his street was Dan Marino Field. I knew Dan Marino was from Pittsburgh. I wonder if he used to play in this park, or if he was from this neighborhood as well. Interesting. Check this out, just a little further down I found this. Childhood home of Dan Marino, Andy Warhol, and Bruno Sammartino. Yep, I knew Bruno was from out here. I didn't know South Oakland though. It's really fascinating. I got curious and I was like, I wonder where Dan Marino's childhood home was. And when I found it and I looked on the map, it is literally like his backyard touches Andy's backyard. He was on the next street over, but their backyards connected. How crazy is that? Not a terrible neighborhood. Don't see any historical mark or anything, so they must like their privacy from, I don't know if somebody lives in the house or if it's bought to become a museum or what. Online, when you look up the address, it just says the museum is permanently closed, so That doesn't mean that it was ever a museum, but... So you gotta remember how hard life would have been for his family. His father was an immigrant who came over, and then it took a couple of years for his mother to be able to come over. His father worked constantly, and then when Andy was 1, the Great Depression hit, the stock market crashed. And so, you know, a lot of the businesses that employed people here in Pittsburgh, they went under. So he had to take any job that he could get, several jobs, working in steel mills and working coal, doing just any kind of job he could get, working as often as he could. So to get him and his family a house, that was quite something. That was something very special. It was this side of the duplex right here, 3252. That was Andy Warhol's childhood home. This is where his, like I said, he had that really debilitating nervous disorder where just sometimes even to walk or talk, he would just get so nervous that he couldn't function. So his mother would baby him, and some of the family said kind of like Molly coddled him. Here, he would spend all of his days sitting in the living room, basically took over the living room, and would draw all day. Draw everything he could. And you know, it's amazing that those drawings now would be worth enough to buy probably most of this block or, you know, several houses. He would even, you know, when he would draw that kind of stuff later on in his life, he would do the same kind of doodles when his mom moved in with him in New York, and she would say, like, you need to throw all this stuff away. He goes, are you kidding? This is going to be worth money someday. It's going to be worth a lot. So here was his childhood home. Not a museum or anything like that, but it's amazing. He was the one that coined the idea that everyone will have 15 minutes of fame some point in their life. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this vlog on the great Andy Warhol, known as Andy Warhol. I enjoyed seeing all these sites, even though we couldn't get in the church. This was really something. I'm glad to get to share his life with you and his genius. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, Betty, for being a Patreon sunglass vlog patron, and we will see you all next time from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Have a good night and goodbye.